people and goods on the move. If you're joining us on the web stream, a warm welcome to you as well. Our next panel is about transport supply resiliency and the impact of global inflation. I'd like to bring up the panel now. This panel is going to be moderated by McKinsey Senior Partner Detlev Mohr. Detlev, bring up your two panelists. Let's give you a welcome to the main stage.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction, and thank you for having us here. I'm delighted to moderate this panel today, and warm welcome to Katharina and Essa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me briefly introduce you so that everybody knows whom we have here on stage. Katharina, since 4 years you are the Senior Vice President Global Operations at DHL Supply Chain, and before that, which is also very relevant for our topic here, you have been responsible for shared value and Go Green for more than 8 years. So very much looking forward to hear about your experiences. And Essa Al-Saleh, CEO of Volta Trucks.
Yep.
You started as a chairman in 2020 and then became the CEO last year. And before that, you have been for more than 13 years the CEO of Agility. And during your tenure, you built the company from a one-country operation with 300 employees, 150 million revenues into a 4 billion company in 100 countries and 18,000 employees. So a wonderful track record of building a company and multi-entrepreneur, so to say.
Thank you.
Glad to have you both here and to discuss a bit with you. So both of you have a lot of experience across the industry and understand logistics end to end, and you have a passion for resilience and sustainability of supply chains, obviously. And the topic that we discuss today is therefore pretty broadly spanned: transport supply chain resilience. So we will be able to cover a lot of things from the trends today, situation, what have we learned from the recent 2-3 years, what does sustainable transportation mean in the future, and what are some of the solutions that we are all looking forward to have. Let's start with the current situation. Last 2 years have been a roller coaster with COVID, huge disruptions in supply chains, capacity shortages, ports were crowded, prices were rising. Many players also made pretty good profitability in these times. And this year, when we all thought things are getting back a bit more to normal, we had the terrible war now in Ukraine, with again disruptions, but most importantly, sky-high energy prices, inflation driving up, creating again a lot of problems in the industry. So let's get a bit of your view on the current situation, which requires quite a lot of resilience from everybody in this place here. So Katharina, how would you describe the situation today?
I mean, you mentioned pretty much a lot of the things that are going on already. So obviously they all have an effect on the transport or logistics industry. You mentioned congested ports, so all of a sudden existing routes were not available anymore. You mentioned inflation. We see that, of course, we have assets like trucks and warehouses, but also people are at the core of what we do. And with inflation, of course, that changes things. The labor costs will go up. We have usually, on average, of course, every country is different, an inflation on labor cost of about 3 to 5%. Now we're calculating more towards 10. So obviously that's in a low margin business. That's a highly relevant factor that is happening. Also, the geopolitical situation, apart from the war being horrible, has a lot of impact with regards to trade compliance, with regards to sourcing, steel prices going up, I think we really recognize how interconnected everything is. And as a logistics provider, we have to be very flexible. I think the positive thing is such a big company like DHL, we're active in 220 countries and territories, and in all kinds of sectors, we're able to balance this quite a lot. So I think in that sense, we're probably still doing good. But yeah, you said it, it's a tough time at the moment for the world.
Essa, what do you hear from your customers?
I mean, how I would start, first of all, is in assessing and diagnosing the situation. These disruptions have been here for the past couple of years due to COVID and continue now. And the question, will we ever get back to a steady state where you're managing? And probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
Right? Because, you know, if you think about the underlying or undercurrents driving these disruptions, you have, whether it's geopolitical, whether it is shifts in the supply chain, more nearshoring, more e-commerce driven. There's quite a few major trends that are going to continue to drive, I don't want to say instability, but disruptions, or shifts, major shifts. So the question for me, in my current role as the CEO of Volta Trucks, where we're building an urban electric vehicle and looking to get to market by early next year, is how do you navigate these choppy waters? And what are the key success factors a company like us needs to have in place to support our mission and support the goals of delivering an electric vehicle to market, which is important for us and our shareholders, but also important for the environment that we're living in to drive sustainable solutions. So what are those things that I think are important in this environment? I probably look at it in a few areas. One is you can't go alone in this environment. You need the right partners to support your ability to deliver value, which is in our case to deliver trucks in the market for our customers. And partners involve in the supply chain, partners in our components, partners in all aspects of our value chain. But that partnership is very key. The second part of that is how do you maintain a lot of transparency in the supply chain, in our ability to deliver. So one of the things in my previous experience with manufacturers is give us your forecast. And now I'm in a position where I have to give forecasts to many of our customers or partners. And that's important where you know, kind of how to manage that transparency, which leads to what kind of systems you put in place. So that's also a big feature and factor of a business, successful business. So it is, you know, partnerships, systems, and then ultimately, I think what's very important is the people and culture you create in your organization. Because if you believe that disruptions are not going to go away, how do you build an organization, a value system, a culture, and a skill set that allows you to, as you said, adapt, maintain agility, flexibility in your operation. And these are the things that we have to manage on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I actually appreciate you inviting me to this panel, where not only do I have to come think about and communicate, but that process allows me to kind of internalize and make sure that we're thinking through all the dynamics, and to the extent that we share and get feedback, it's also helpful in this process.
Let me just briefly add on your point with the culture, because I think in all the, like when you listed the things, it sounded like pretty gloomy in a way, and partly maybe it is, but I think the culture and the willingness of the people to adapt and to do great things was one of the really cool,
100%.
I would almost say, discoveries.
Yeah.
It's not that we didn't know it, but it was like, wow, how agile are our people, and their really can-do attitude. We make it happen and we make it work, and that's why I just wanted to emphasize that culture point. which, yeah, I saw at least in DHL, and I think it was in several areas, you saw people really rolling up their sleeves and saying, this is not what we expected, but we're going to do something good about it. And I think this is something that is very positive.
And I guarantee your customers are thankful for that.
I think I just wanted to build on this, because despite all these disruptions and difficulties and things that nobody had thought about, at the end of the day, more or less, supply chains worked. There were some problems, but things worked. There were no real shortages, maybe some delays, maybe some higher prices, but overall, I think there was a remarkable sustainability and reliability in the supply chains because of this agility.
Yeah, and I mean, we have this vision of supply chain in a minute where we could really set up a supply chain for a customer in a minute or maybe in a day. And it was more like a vision, we want to go there. But then when vaccines had to be distributed around the globe, when they had to be distributed within a country in a very short time scale with high requirements to logistics in terms of cooling, where they come from, where they need to go, we had setups of like a week or so, and it was all seamlessly working. And I think we were really amazed at that this vision is not so far in the future. It's actually already doable now.
Let's pivot a bit to e-commerce, which has been a big driver in the last couple of years, and specifically during the pandemic also accelerate. How do you see the next couple of years evolving from an e-commerce perspective and the implications for the logistics industry?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a very steep increase now, and then a little bit of a dip, but my prediction is it will increase further, maybe not on the extreme level it did in the last 2 years, but I think it will come back to a normal growth, but still will grow, I'm sure. When we look at inflation, we talked about it, of course, the buying power will maybe go down a bit for big spend things, or maybe also in the retail area. On the other hand, I think, yeah, in general, e-commerce, we don't see it declining. It will increase.
As Volta is focusing on the city logistics distribution, specifically in mega cities. So how do you think it's evolving?
So I think on the e-commerce side, which has to do a lot with the kind of delivery to the last mile, the homes. And in an urban setting, what it's done is created a tremendous amount of convenience for the consumer. But some of the consequences of that is it's increased congestion in the city, in traffic. It's increased, if you add to that the increased urbanization in cities, there's a compounding effect of that. And then, so what that results in is significantly more pollution, unsafe environment for people who live in an urban setting. So part of our, linking it back to what we do at Volta and why I think e-commerce is an important factor, not the only factor in transportation or sustainable transportation, is we've designed a truck that is sustainable in many aspects. We solve for the sustainability part. We solve for an important factor is the safety features of the truck. If you look at our truck, it's designed in a way from the ground up where the driver sits at pedestrian height in the center with full visibility around the truck. And I think that's very important in an urban setting where you have pedestrians and bikers and growing demand for commercial vehicles driven by e-commerce. So our type of truck enables a much safer factor in urban transportation driven by e-commerce, amongst other factors. But also, I think, and I'm sure, Katharina, you're thinking about this in your business, is how to redesign the supply chain around sustainable solutions, whether it's e-commerce driven or other trends that drive traffic in and out of a city. And these are things that are very important. I take Paris as an example of what's happening. In Paris, in our situation, or intend to ban diesel vehicles in 2024. They have the Olympics planned in 2024, and they're thinking about how to organize and ensure they can support all the demand of equipment, cargo, food around the city, on top of a potential ban of diesel vehicles. So you have to reconfigure and rethink all of that, and I think we are one component of that, and we're coming to market with a product that hopefully will support that.
Yeah, you talked about one part of the element, which is the electrification, which is obviously good from an emission point of view. Nevertheless, you see, if you're in a big city, you see one van after the other from different logistics providers going through the same streets and clogging it. There's also some voices that say, well, maybe we need a more systemic approach on this to really find an optimized distribution in a very scarce geographical area. Any thoughts on that topic?
I love the question. If you ask a big player, should we consolidate more and have less trucks coming into the city? Yeah, I mean, we're happy to do it for everyone. It's not a problem. But more seriously, I think it is obviously, when you live in a city, it's what comes with the competition we wanted, is that you have the 5, 6 different providers coming to your home, and to find a way how to combine all this is probably doable. I would like to touch on 2 other aspects. One is when we think about who comes on the last mile and distributes, it's usually we think electric is the main solution, and I think it is really one. But if you look at, for example, our fleet, we have in total around 120,000 vehicles, of which 25,000 are electric, but the same amount is also bikes and e-bikes and tricycles. So we have really used them for a long time already in some of our countries, and kind of rediscovered them in some countries to really say it's a good solution for the last mile too. It doesn't have to be the van sometimes. Now, of course, e-commerce is usually big packages and you can't all put them on a bike. But to include them in the city, in a sustainable city logistics, I think is a promising trend. And the other aspect I just want to highlight, when we talk e-commerce, usually we only think about the last mile. So when we think about these products coming, also the customers, so the private customers, they're like, okay, I have these 5 providers coming to my street and delivering this. But what you also have to see is that a majority of the CO2 is emitted before that last mile. So that last mile has a single-digit percentage of the footprint of this package that you receive, and it's just the visible part. So as someone who does logistics at the heart for quite some time now, I'm in working with DHL, I'm always amazed how people forget about this invisible part that also happens before. So that's something I would also like to touch upon.
Yeah, just to add a number, it's 5% of all global emissions are linked to road transport, and obviously most of it is on the long haul, so it's a big topic.
Right, yes. And there the electrification of vehicles is nowhere near. Like out of these 25,000 we have, I think maybe 10 or 20 are trucks, and the rest is smaller vehicles such as the ones you provide, which are absolutely needed. But if we look at the line haul, that's really where the most of the emissions are caused, and where we have little or less solutions than we have on the last mile.
Which brings us to the debate about battery electric vehicles versus hydrogen. And if we walk through the halls here, we see both competing. Some manufacturers going for both. Some are focused on one technology. How do you see it play out?
Yeah, no, I think well, we think battery is important for obvious reasons. But in that sense, doesn't mean hydrogen. There's no role for hydrogen. To your point, on the longer haul, maybe there is a use case and requirement. I think what's absolutely important for us in our mission is to deliver on a solution at scale and quickly. So we're coming to a market next year with our series production. We've already gone through 3 stages. But we solve for a use case that can be applied in 2023, where it's pretty much a return to base option, where you charge overnight, load in the morning, do your rounds, which is typically around 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 kilometers a day. And the truck is spec'd to do up to 200 plus kilometers without compromising payload, right? Which is also an important factor important consideration. So that's kind of one area to solve for today's opportunity. And the infrastructure you need for that return to base is only at the warehouse, right? Only at the distribution center. So you don't have to worry about putting it or having charging infrastructure along your route. And increasing that capacity, I think, gets back also to how it supports building resiliency in the supply chain. Resilience is not only the ability to deliver, but the ability to deliver in a sustainable way. And this is an area of kind of where part of our mission is how do we get to that market at speed and scale, and solve for the various benefit that you get on sustainability, safety, and optionality on your supply chain in an urban setting.
I think we have that in common. Both what you said is your mission, but also to scale now fast.
That's right.
I've been thinking when I walked through the stalls here to get here, I'm like, I was amazed how present and how obvious everywhere is sustainability. But then, to be honest, it has been for some years. It's increasing, yes, but I remember 10 years ago, we already thought, oh, we will have electrified a lot of our fleet. And now looking at it, for the last mile, we're getting there. And we plan by 2030 to have 60% electrified across the whole world. But it's still 60%, and this will be quite an effort, also monetary effort from our side. But then again, if we look at the line haul, what are the solutions that are there? And there, I think whether it's hydrogen or electric, I'm not an engineer. I have an opinion, maybe. I think hydrogen for the long haul is probably the more promising solution. But as a company, we've done it once. About 10 years ago, we said, where are the electric vehicles? And they weren't there. And then we said, okay, let's build our own vehicle. And it worked for some time, but we realized we're not a car manufacturer, we're a logistics company. So for me, the question is this or the other? I would answer it with, it needs to be scalable. I'm with you. It needs to be scalable and a solution that is, of course, sustainable in both ways of the meaning of the word, but it needs to be there not necessarily only in 10, 20 years. So that's why at DHL, we just go a multi-route. So we work with electric on the last mile, we work with electric on the line haul, we work with biogas, we work with hydrogen. So we just try it all, hoping that one of the solutions will scale quickly and we can use it.
It will also require that we have the necessary infrastructure in place to charge or to provide the hydrogen. We made some calculations and estimation that it will take $450 billion investments till 2040 to set up the necessary infrastructure to support all the electric and hydrogen vehicles that are supposed. So getting both sides of the equation, getting the products right and getting the infrastructure in place will be super critical. But I think the key question is, what do the customers do? When we look at numbers, 3,600 large corporations have committed to science-based targets. Many of them promise to go to zero. 60% of fleet operators have also formulated decarbonization targets, which is pretty encouraging in one perspective. I think the question, Andy, do you see that customers are also willing to pay additional money for a green or zero-emission solutions? Or is that where aspiration and reality are still a little bit separate?
I would say both. It's probably half full, the glass. We do have great collaborations with our customers where they're willing to invest with us and say, we believe in this and it's important for us. some of the piloting of alternative fuels and drivetrains we have done together with customers, where we do dedicated solutions for them. So I think we couldn't have done it without them. But on the other hand, you still have to see that the market is very price-driven. I will not disguise this. And at the moment, when we look at our operating cost and the cost of an electric vehicle, it's still 2.5 to 3 times more to a conventional vehicle. So of course, we cannot swallow all that cost. So we need to come to an agreement with the customer. And that's where some customers are willing to do it. But I have to say some need a lot of convincing and some will also say no. Yeah, so I think it's really, I hope that this general, you mentioned it, commitment to science-based target, the general awareness to this, and also in the end customer power. I mean, where you put your money, where you invest your money, where you buy, these are the decisions that drive the economy. And only if we, as everyday human being, not being a management position or anywhere, if every one of us says, this is important to me, and that's why I choose a provider or I choose a manufacturer who has this at heart and also puts the money where the mouth is, then we can change things. I think if we only wait for everyone to do their things, things are also moving, but I see that still as our common responsibility.
Yet, probably still many people in the audience will think about total cost of ownership. So Esa, when are we positive on this one?
He's calculating already.
Can you make a good offer?
Yeah, absolutely. With the purchase order, we can make a good offer. No, it's. I think there's several things going through my mind. First of all, who pays? On the who pays, I guess the question is, what's the cost of inaction, right? I think it's going to be high. We all pay for that inaction. That said, we're in a phase, a disruptive phase right now. It's a transition, and this transition, not everybody is on board yet, or fully committed to it, or are waiting and seeing. I think what we've seen is there's probably 3 segments of customers. There are those innovators that are willing to try and go. Others are even probably early adopters. And then there are a segment of customers that are laggards, right? They're going to wait and see until, and that's pretty normal cycle in a disruptive phase. But I do believe we are at an inflection point where the ability to deliver solutions at scale that solve a use case in the short term may require some subsidies to be competitive, and there are subsidies in the market today that enable that. However, we as an industry cannot be reliant and should not be reliant on subsidies permanently. Otherwise, we're not a sustainable business. But I think in terms of our goals, we see the ability to get to what I would call TCO parity without subsidies closer to the 2025-26 timeframe, which is not far off. And that's why it's important to get to market at scale. Part of driving cost and improve reducing cost is you got to be a business that's not just producing a few hundred or a few thousand. You really got to develop, and commit to the option. And therefore, that's what we are doing. What it does create tension in the supply chain because you're ordering or building a supply chain with parts and components and integrating them and delivering on a truck in a different way, which is part of what a business like us has to manage. The good news for us is because we're starting up on a new basis, we're able to give our partners kind of long forecasts, and therefore they're able to plan and address their supply chain needs to meet our requirements in the time that we need it. So that's a big part of kind of our value, our core competence that we're building in the organization with the teams that we have who bring the tools, the systems, and the culture that we talked about in order to manage in this disruptive environment and to enable this transition. But I really do believe we're at an inflection point where companies like us will get to market and have solutions at scale and competitive, at a competitive rate.
I think one point maybe to add to what you said is transparency and I call it education, because it's honestly sometimes not easy to understand what's the right thing to do. Like, I want to buy green as a customer, like a big customer, B2B, or as a private customer. Like, how do I choose and how do I know it's green or not? So what we do is we work with our customers to provide transparency on the carbon footprint, on the possibilities, and ideally we have solutions that are then scalable and hence not so costly and not in a pilot stage anymore, in order to really then make also a competitive offer. But I think that is something that hopefully with a general awareness and the time moving on is something that will also help us if everyone is more educated and it's more transparent. I mean, at the moment, if you have a subcontractor, there's no legal obligation that they tell you how much CO2 they emitted. You have to work with them to understand it, or you have to use assumptions or things like that. So my hope and also my expectation is that that will change over time, and there will be much more transparency and hence also easier to act.
If zero-emission trucks are significantly more expensive when you buy them, do you see challenges for your small?
Really depends on a lot of things.
Because many of you build today on also asset-light models in the industry.
We have both, yeah.
But,
I mean, the last
that
mile
depends
for us
on
is not
someone else buying it. So, and if the capex need is getting bigger.
I mean, ESSA already promised.
Yeah, I already promised.
Near term for everyone. So I think that's one tick for the last mile then.
Deal.
But I mean, it really depends on a lot of things. On the fuel price in general, will that, when we do total cost of ownership and total cost of the lifetime, then of course the fuel price for a conventional diesel plays a huge role in the whole cost calculation. And then you mentioned subsidies. Yes, nobody wants to be dependent on subsidies, but they do help. Let's be honest, they do help. Governmental regulations do help. So I think it really depends on are these things all coming together. And then from my view, it should be possible for smaller companies also to go to zero emissions. That has to be our aim.
I would add, road freight in general is a very competitive, fragmented, low margin business, right?
Yes.
I mean, it is a tough business. That said, I do think there are certain segments and suppliers. This is an opportunity to distinguish yourself in a very competitive, low margin, fragmented business. So we talk to customers, and we've signed pre-orders with customers who are, have that interest to get to market and distinguish themselves, whether they serve kind of their end customer or fashion companies or life sciences and pharmaceutical who want a clean, safe truck to enable their operation and deliver value in a way that's not only cost competitive but also distinguished in a very tough market to distinguish yourself. And this is where DHL is actually at the forefront, to the point that you decided to build your own vehicles for a period of time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it takes. It's going to take kind of forward thinkers who kind of will help turn the flywheel and get this industry going.
And same as I said before, that everyone in their buying choice influences things. It's the same for us when you talk about subcontractors or smaller trucking companies. Of course, if we say, which we do, and we've just recently launched a new carrier certification based on green criteria to certify our carriers. Unfortunately, there is no international certification that we can draw from, which would be far easier. It doesn't exist, but then we said, okay, let's do our own and say, okay, we rate the carriers according to their green performance, and we prefer those who have a higher rating. I think in that sense, you're rewarding, to your point, more business
Yeah.
to the ones who invest in that.
The other thing that we have seen over the last couple of years is a lot of investment going into the logistics space, creating new platforms, new software transparency tools. Alone in 2021, we had 25 billion investments, and the first quarter was also pretty lot of going on, and we see a number of companies that is talked about in this space. So do you see these attackers changing the industry, or is it just painful at the moment, and at the end of the day, scale, the usual suspects is still around and providing the best services?
You mean in general the digital solutions that support it? I would say you can't rate digital solutions high enough. We always look at the vehicle and say, okay, we need to exchange the engine, and the person needs to drive more efficiently, and of course everyone needs to be safe. Then you can optimize the route, and that's already where it starts. That if the better tech solutions you have to do an optimized routing and loading of the truck and combination, and that's the core of logistics, obviously, to orchestrate the supply chain in an efficient way, it has, I would say, almost the same effect. Of course, you can never get to zero emissions with that, but there's still empty loads, there's still not ideally planned and orchestrated routes. So I think also all the data that we get, we now need to make use of more. But I think it will help us, yeah.
Yeah, no, the way I would, just to complement what you said and kind of give a little bit different perspective, whether you're an existing supply chain, global logistics business, and then you have your new startups, disruptors who are entering the market to offer supply chain, there's room for all, but the common theme for everybody is that there is a need to continue to innovate around systems, process, deploying new technologies to differentiate yourself. Whether it includes kind of the operating system or the type of trucks you use or the visibility, the optimization tools, all of that is essential if we're going to get to drive improvement in quality, safety, cost over time. So I think that's technology absolutely essential. Those that don't invest in new technology, whether again a new truck, they're the ones that are going to get disrupted in this marketplace. So I think that's why this is where, when you talk to the cost of the transition to zero emission, where today's trucks have become much more technology enabled, providing a tremendous amount of data, to companies where they can understand the performance of the truck, performance of the driver, location, temperature, all the things that are required to continue to drive productivity, quality, safety, and that creates new opportunities in this marketplace to distinguish and reduce cost over time.
When we talk to our clients about digitization, the key concern that we hear is how do we get the talent to do that? As you're a young company, how do you get the talent that you need to reach your objectives?
It's actually one of the privileges I have in previously and today with Volta is we've been able to attract a tremendous amount of talent who are driven by our purpose and mission. A year ago, last year, or actually a year and a half ago, we were roughly 20 people. Today we're around 500 people in the organization. We're on pace to hire 30, 40 people a month. But it's not simply just hiring the individuals. It's hiring, how you onboard them, integrate them, build cross-functional teams to work together. And that's important in a scale-up like us. But to get to your question is, one is purpose and two is culture, back to the culture point we made, where people want to be part of an organization where they have the ability to have impact. So they're not only a number in our organization, but they're actually driving impact, whether in the engineering side, in the supply chain, in the manufacturing, in the service, in the sales. They're having impact, not only to what we have to do as a business, but to what the outcome that we will create if we're successful.
Katharina, your company is at the other end of the size spectrum. So how do you deal with the challenge?
We have around 590,000 employees as a group, PDHL group. And I think we have probably 3.5 million people applying through our portal every year. But yeah, of course, both we have a lot of talent that still want to work for us, and I believe it's for the same reasons you said. People are driven by purpose and wanting to create an impact, and we believe as DHL we're connecting people, improving lives, so that's our vision and our purpose. So I think that when people feel there's the culture and this is real, it's not just a slogan, but it's happening, that is attractive. But at the same time, we have an increase in jobs that are less you're a truck driver or you're working in a warehouse. But as you said, to build a bridge to your previous point about digitalization, where it's more around working with data, which is to some people more interesting than driving a truck. So I would say probably one of the biggest challenges is really getting people who still want to drive the truck and who want to work in the warehouse and want to stay there. And I think for that we just need to continue being a great place to work and being one where you feel you're really making an impact. At the end of the day, you go home happy and safe, you return to your family, and right. You're also part of a family. As DHL, we're, as I said, across the globe. We even have our own passport, so everywhere you travel, there's usually a DHL branch. So I can say, even when I'm on holiday, sometimes I visit my colleagues in the most remote countries or places, and it feels like a family and like almost like its own nationality. And I think that sense of belonging and being able to belong to something that serves a good purpose is hopefully one that will help us further recruit talent.
So when do you expect an autonomous truck to be really on the road?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a role for autonomy, but in an urban setting where you still need it's very challenging, yeah. And we want to solve for today's problems. But we organizationally will always continue to evaluate that. But I think I want to just highlight 2 points you made, right? The truck driver and making it attractive for them and safe for them is an important part of our mission in how we've done and built our business and the truck that we've designed and coming to market with. It's completely reimagined, I mean, many customers or suppliers or partners tell us, why hasn't this been done before? Because it deals with some of we believe the root issues in this industry, where there's a driver shortage generally in trucking. Yeah. Some of that is due to attrition, where they lead through health issues or accidents, there's a general trend downwards. But if you create a truck that's attractive, we believe we create we create opportunities for a wider demographic of drivers. And number 2, we have less attrition, hopefully, if you drive a Volta truck. So I think that's a big part of why, what is driving us as an organization. That safety factor and appeal to a wider demographic. Yeah,
so that what you do really feels good. And then Absolutely. At the same time, I think if the purpose comes to it, then you can feel like, okay, I mean, basically someone brought these chairs, someone's brought this water, and it's maybe not all DHL, hopefully some, but you're really part of the everyday life. And I think if that, and then your work itself is also safe and fun and meaningful, hopefully we continue to attract talent.
So we are coming to the end of our session. To wrap us up, if you look ahead 10 years from now, pick 2 words that you think are the key themes for our industry?
I'll start. Themes, I would say transformed and impact. Maybe it would be my 2 words.
I would say digital and sustainable.
Thank you very much
Very good.
for a wonderful conversation. I hope you all enjoyed. And I think we have great and interesting times ahead. And with lots of innovation and keeping the agility, I think we will be in good shape going forward. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, huh?
Well, thank you very much to Essa, Katharina, and Detlev. The #1 question that I get asked when I'm standing here after where is the bathroom is, where is that guy's booth? Do any of you have booths or exhibits that you would like to plug? If so, let's do it.
20.
20.
Hall 8, or section 18. Yeah.
18.
Yep.
Okay, that's where Volta is. And what about you, Katharina? Anything to plug?
I think you can reach the